Live from Nissan Stadium. Welcome into the Paul Kuharsky podcast. Site of another Titans disaster. Jaguars 10, Titans 6. Couldn't score a touchdown. I'm brought to you by Edley's BBQ, best barbecue place in Nashville. Wish I could stop there on my way home. Wish I was eating there right now instead of reviewing this miserable game with some of the most loyal Titans fans that there are. Welcome in. Come on in. Paul Kuharsky at paulkuharsky.com here at Nissan Stadium. Those look like police sirens in the background on the Nissan Stadium ribbon board. And I think they're reflecting a little harder because they've got a tarp down that makes it look like there's snow on the field. Those are not police lights, and that is not snow, but police lights would be effective. Somebody should call the police on this team, have them arrested for what they're doing, what they're putting together. Awful, awful football. I mean, 2 trips down in the red zone where they came away with 0 points, and that's the story of the game. I mean, holding them to 10 is pretty good, though they didn't sack them. They turned the ball over twice. They had 11 snaps inside the 20-yard line, 7 inside the 10-yard line, 4 inside the 4-yard line, 3 inside the 2-yard line. 0 points out of that. I made the case in what I wrote tonight. You know, they may not qualify as worse than the Giants or worse than the Raiders in terms of record. They may not qualify as worse than New England or Carolina or even Jacksonville in draft order. But I think if you put these Titans on a neutral field against any of those teams, you'd be hard-pressed to pick this team to win right now. Maybe the Giants, maybe the Raiders. But look, they're a contender for worst team in the league. They've been eliminated from the playoffs. I hope BH is asking that sarcastically. I mean, they've got 3 wins. There's no way they could win 4 in a row to end the season. Sam Smith gets first question here. Fan base is drowning in apathy. If ownership wants the new stadium, somewhat for a full-fledged change has to be made. There has to be wholesale reset of everything in this organization. Well, listen, the new stadium is a long time away. 2005, 2006, 2007, 2 full seasons is an eternity in the NFL. And also, that stadium is going to be full even if Titans are bad. They won't be this bad. But even if they're bad, all indications are those super high-priced seats, the first 2 tiers of what they want to sell in that stadium, have sold. And the idea that you have to have a good football team to move into a new stadium, I mean, were the Raiders, have the Raiders been particularly good in Allegiant Stadium? I'm not recalling seeing the Raiders in the playoffs very much. And they're certainly, in the Titans situation now, and that's the newest stadium in the league, right? So people go to NFL games to be at NFL games. It'd be great if the hometown team was good, but we know Nashville's not about the hometown team, really. It's largely about an NFL game. Need a no-nonsense, hard-ass coach like Dan Campbell, Bill Cowher, somebody that will wake their asses up, says William Ayers. Gee, it sounds like the guy they fired before this season. What were my thoughts on the play calling in the red zone today? I don't really like to get into the play calling as a root cause. I didn't understand why they stopped running in the first trip. I think that was a big mistake. They had 3 plays from the 2-yard line, and they didn't run. And Pollard at that stage of the game especially was running very effectively. So I think they outsmart themselves sometimes, and they don't run in run situations in the red zone near the goal line. And I don't like that. Calvin Ridley there has to, and he said he's got to play it better on the other later red zone situation, 3rd down and 5. He catches the ball for a 2-yard gain. Now, Levis is a little bit late, but Ridley said, he could have done better. He thought that somebody was pretty much on his left shoulder as he catches that ball going out of bounds. I think he can plant hard and try to dive for it or try to turn upfield. And I think everybody thought he had an opportunity to do that, including him. James is talking about the O-line. I mean, Levis was dealing with pressure. He was only sacked 2 times today. The pressure wasn't the story of this game the way it's been the story of a lot of games. He threw 32 times, completed 19 for 168. Jones threw 31 times, completing 23 for 220. But Mac Jones threw 2 picks, and Will Levis didn't throw a pick. So, look, all the numbers were pretty even offensively, but you had the 2 turnovers for the Titans. It should have been different. Petit Frere got 2 penalties and had trouble again. Lack of outside rush is really bad. The Titans had 1 sack, and it was Landry tackling Jones near the sideline on a run, and he got him, for a 0-yard gain. So that's a sack. Had he gained a yard, it would have been, a 1-yard run. This team would have been way better under Vrabel, says AJ. I agree. Thoughts on Levis' injury? He said they shot him up, and, he was trying to avoid any further, banging it. But he said, I've been playing with the sprained AC joint, so that indicates he doesn't feel like, and they don't feel like it's healed fully from the 3 weeks off, and this isn't going to do it any favors. So I think it's going to be something we're monitoring this week. Kick the field goal. Jim wants a field goal at the end of the first half. It's easy to go back and say kick the field goal both times, you win the game, but everybody wants them to be aggressive. Everybody wants their team, generally speaking, to be aggressive on 4th downs down there. Now, the Titans have been a bad red zone team. Jaguars are like 26th in the red zone. They allow like 65-ish% touchdowns. So it's just a real indictment of the Titans' inabilities. Callahan, a beaten down man tonight. Then he comes up at really he does pretty well explaining things and taking the bullet and all of that when situations are bad, but he comes in with a lot of positives right out of the gate, a lot of positives, and I think that's just awful. You can't say a lot of positives. There aren't a lot of positives in a 10-6 loss. You can get up there and sing the praises of the defense if you want. Nobody wants to hear it. And later on, he said that. Nobody gives a shit. But he needs to say that early. Sam, does anyone have faith that Amy is capable of leading a successful organization? She only shows up when things are good. When it's bad, it's not her fault. I don't know that she said it's not her fault. We don't know whose fault she thinks it is. She doesn't speak. She only shows up when things are good. She hasn't showed up since COVID. We haven't heard from her since before COVID. But a lot of you, look, you wanted to let Rand cook. Miss Amy, is the greatest because she showed up at tailgates, and when things were good, you thought she was the absolute best owner in the league. I heard she was the best owner in the league from a lot of fans. So, I guess your opinions have changed. I don't think they can fire a coach after a year. I think one of the reasons they can't fire a coach after a year is, look, I understand there are only 32 jobs in the league, and you're going to get somebody, and I think you get somebody good, but if I'm a candidate for a job, I'm not super interested in this job. After you fired Mike Vrabel, who's a good coach, and then you will have gone and hired a young up-and-comer, and you would have given him 1 year. So I'd be very gun-shy in looking at the jobs around the league and saying, I want to go work for Amy Abstrunk in Nashville, seeing how she treated her last 2 coaches if this job was, in fact, open. That's a very ugly place to come. And then if I'm coming to work for Rand Carthon and or Chad Brinker, they haven't proven anything about what they've got going on and the competency of building an organization. And so I led my column. Burke Nihill, team president, and Chad Brinker, president of football operations, Long talk outside the locker room that lasted beyond any player being in the locker room. I don't think they're hatching a plan to fire somebody in that setting, but very serious and long conversation post-game that usually wouldn't take place in that spot at that time. So very interesting. Otis Reese, Josh. I mean, you don't want Otis Reese starting on this team. I don't. Let's look at the defensive stats and see what he did. I mean, he probably made a lot of tackles, but those tackles probably far away from the line of scrimmage. So Gifford, 11, Brownlee, 9, Hooker, 6, Worley, 5, Reese, 5, Simmons, 5, Joseph Day, 5, Arden Key, 4. Quarterback hits, they had 6. So Landry had a tackle for a loss, which is the sack. Quarterback hit, the sack counts in there. So he had a quarterback hit on top of the sack. But I think all these backup inside linebackers are bad. I think the starting inside linebackers are bad. I had better hopes for Jerome Baker, who's not very good. I loved Ernest Jones, but they got themselves some draft picks in the Ernest Jones stuff. What else do we have? Ran, cooked, and burned it all to hell, says Jeremy Martin. Yeah, I think Clinton's being a little hard here. I think this game erased all the goodwill that Levis had from the last 4 games. He had a chance to carry this team to victory against a really bad team. Hope this helps make the case to clean house. And Levis didn't make a ton of mistakes in this game. I mean, he could have played better for sure. Got clobbered and his shoulder's bad in the second half. He lost his grip a little bit on the throw to NWI in the end zone, which NWI still could have caught. But Ridley's the guy running out of bounds. The throw's a little bit late, but the receiver still should have made the play. The throw's a little bit high on NWI, but he should still make the play. I don't know if I'm pointing to Levis as the number one reason this team lost the game. I think the play calling was pretty weak, and I'm not one to jump on play calling. I think you got to get the ball to Pollard on some of those plays, at least one of those plays from the 2-yard line. I think NWI probably should catch that ball. I think Ridley's got to get you a first down there. Then you get a new set of downs, and you're you got 4 more plays, 3 more plays inside the 9-yard line. That would have been inside the 4 to 5-yard line. So I don't think, I disagree. I don't think this game washes away Levis's goodwill. Now, I think the last 2 games have washed away the team's goodwill, generally speaking. I think last week did a hell of a lot to wash away the progress they'd made with the 2 closer losses against good teams, which maybe we overcredited, and then the win against Houston, which has proven to be a fluke, really. Continues to telegraph his first or second read, missing wide open receivers is Levis capable of correcting. I mean, look, Levis needs to get better at a lot of things, but Levis has played some winning quarterback over the last 6 weeks, capable of winning those games if other areas of the team play better. William Ayers complimenting the show. Love your show, number 1 in my book. Thank you, William. Do me a favor, eat at Edley's. Tell your friends about Edley's. Tell your friends about the show. Retweet the show right now if you're watching on Twitter. If you're on YouTube, be sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you're listening later on Apple, on iHeart, on Spotify, like, rate, review, all of that good stuff over there. Subscribe. All of that's very important. Sergeant Bubble says nothing positive about 6 points against this defense. And this is a crappy red zone defense. I mentioned that. They need to do stuff. Is it now pouring rain behind me? Oh, that's going to be fun to leave this stadium. You could probably see. If Amy turned on Vrabel to side with Rand, how's that looking now? Yeah, it looks bad. It looks bad. I mean, Rand underestimated the importance of back-end special team guys who have special team characteristics. That's bit this team in the ass. They underestimated some injury history on some guys. I don't really include the L'Jarius Sneed in that. They underestimated age on some guys. Like, I think they underpredicted injury stuff in some cases. I'm thinking of Condre Diggs, is probably a guy you can't count on a full season out of at this stage, and bring in enough speed overall. And then Callahan's made mistakes. You can't go a month without throwing the ball to NWI when NWI has done what NWI's done since you started throwing them the ball. So it's been a lot. I mean, I don't see. BH says, Callie is cooked out of his element. Fire him and his daddy along with Rain. I mean, Bill Callahan is a good offensive line coach. He hasn't gotten immediate results out of some bad players. Nobody's going to make Nick Petit-Frere a good player. Now, Callahan probably overestimated, the ceiling of Nick Petit-Frere. And Rand didn't give him good enough intel on NPF. But to say fire him, who are you going to get? Think of some of the alternatives we've seen. You want somebody like Keith Carter or Jason Hoteling? That'd be pretty stupid. I think if you fire Brian Callahan, which I don't expect to happen, you should try to retain Bill Callahan. This past free agent class has been a bust, says Marty. I mean, a couple guys. Pollard has been very good. Calvin Ridley, has been pretty good. He made a bad play today, and he got off to a slow start, but he's better than any receiver that they've had in a long time. But CA says when you get an offensive guy, they need to be good at offense. I think that's generally fair, though Vrabel's teams weren't always good at defense. I mean, they had a defense one year that gave up, 3rd and 18 conversions at a historic rate. Could this be the most important loss in Titans history if it leads to cleaning house and a top 5 pick potentially? Asks Benjamin Seaman. I don't think so. I mean, they're drafting 6th right now, still behind Jacksonville because they have the same record as Jacksonville. Jacksonville's strength of schedule is worse. So, I don't think, I don't know. I still don't think firing Brian Callahan after one season is the answer. I think you give him a lot of work. He's got a lot of work to do after one season. And that's for sure. BH, your GM candidate is way, way worse than the current GM. Don't get brainwashed by somebody foolish. Vader Jaw says, so if Callahan is kept and or no one else wants the head coaching job, what can the Titans do to have impactful change? Well, I didn't say nobody else wants a job. I said it's a harder hire. But if Callahan's back, he's allowed to get better. I don't know. You guys just don't allow for anybody to get better. Remember when Calvin Ridley sucked early in the season? And what happened? They kind of were patient with it, and they waited it out, and he continued to practice, and he amped it up, and he changed some things, and he continued to work with Rudolph, and he continued to work with Levis. And guess what? All of a sudden, it actually wasn't that sudden, but gradually things got better. And now he's, pretty reliably giving them big plays on a week-to-week basis. So if Callahan is kept, Callahan's got a huge offseason to get better at clock management and figuring out how they can be a better red zone team and all of that. And he and a staff that would probably have some changes sit down after a week or two off and get to work. And they spend a lot of time going over what went wrong this season, why it went wrong, how to fix it, all of that kind of stuff. And they get better. I'm not guaranteeing you it happens, but everybody in here tends to think things are static. So Nick Westbrook-Akine was a guy who wasn't targeted through 4 weeks. So was he a wash? No, well, they start targeting him and things change. So things can change. Guys can get better. Peter Skoronski, we haven't been bitching about too much lately. But guess what? He's gotten better. But not everybody's terrible all the time. Some people, coaches, players, executives, get better. Now, some of them haven't. Yes, so Clinton. Callahan has failed at what he was brought in to do. The offense is just as bad as when Malik Willis was the starter. So far, things have been bad. But that does not mean that they will be bad. There are a list of coaches, I put this out earlier this year, who had 4 wins or fewer in their first season, who turned out to be Super Bowl winning coaches. Now, I'm not saying Callahan is that, but I'm saying if you fired Bill Walsh, I think, was one of those coaches. And if you fired him after your first season, you're losing out on Hall of Fame coach. Parcells, I think, was on that list. Vermeil. So if you fired those guys after one season, you would have lost out on Hall of Fame coaches. I didn't come here to defend Brian Callahan, but Cyruscain. Do the Titans dare take another tackle in the first round next year? I hope not. I hope they can get a tackle in free agency or in the second round, or if they have a high pick that they could be trading back and having, 3 picks in the top 100, 3 or 4 picks in the top 100. But I would hate for them to have to draft yet another offensive lineman in the first round because they've just invested so much, and they really could use an edge rusher or a wide receiver. But we'll see. I wouldn't put it past them. Robert Price, I think the defense played okay today, but there was a lot of cushion underneath. Felt like we missed McCreary. I think they missed McCreary. There was one first down conversion where they had, somebody in the slot or a safety that was covering somebody lined up in the slot on a 3rd and 5 who was just lined up too far off. And the guy caught the ball at the sticks, and the tackler, the coverage guy, closed and made a tackle at 6 yards. Well, when you're lined up that far off, I don't know what you're expecting to happen. Inside linebackers, certainly. I mean, the depth isn't there, and the starters aren't very good. CI says, Vrabel was good, but wanted to micromanage and do things his way on offense when he's a defensive guy. No business going Downing and Kelly instead of bringing in an experienced grown man for offense. Well, Downing certainly was horrible. But look, Downing is horrible, and he ends up calling plays for another team. So it's not like Vrabel was the only one in the world that thought Downing could do something. Kelly resurfaced as well. He was a control freak. So you can say what you want about Mike Vrabel. You certainly prefer him to what's going on here. Is there any lesson in the Wiz and Hunt situation that impacts Amy's decision on Callahan? She gave Wiz a second season and it went bad. Wiz had a worse team, but wasn't her hire. Wiz, I don't think necessarily had a worse team. I mean, might have had worse personnel. Antonio Andrews was an all-time bad player. It's interesting. But I don't know that she was really around for, I don't know the timetable of her takeover, but that first year and the hire was Tommy Smith. So, I mean, it's different automatically because it wasn't her hire. So things changed there right out of the gate. So I don't know how much similarity there is, except that she may be, if she's unwilling to, if she's thinking like, well, if I'm going to fire him, if he's off to a, bad start in the first 10 games next year. I'm not stumping. Where's this? I'm not stumping for Willis out of this game. For Levis, out of this game. I'm stumping for Levis out of his whole thing and out of the fact that there's no obvious alternative that they have access to. I don't love the quarterbacks in the draft. I don't think they're going to have access to the quarterbacks in the draft. I'm all for getting a veteran who's better than Rudolph here. But I think Levis, in a big picture, which is my job to look at the big picture instead of be super reactionary 3 hours after a loss that you're super frustrated about, Benjamin, is is not crazy. Will Levis has been a better quarterback in the last, 6 games? And today, he was not a disaster. The worst quarterback on the field was Mac Jones, who threw 2 interceptions. Levis had a very mediocre day, 73.4 passer rating. But again, if I could change things, the first thing I would change is the play calling in the red zone. Second thing I would change is Ridley getting a first down on an opportunity to get a first down. Third thing I would change is Westbrook-Akina catching a catchable pass in conjunction with Levis throwing a better ball. But, I mean, if you want to make Levis the GOAT today, have at it. My thoughts on Yellowstone this year, I'm being asked. I don't know where the fuck to find it. Is it on Paramount? Is it on Peacock? It's the most difficult to find big-time show in the history of television. TK says, I'm still dumbfounded how we actually have a play where Jeffrey Simmons is the first read. He wasn't the first read. He never looked at the right side of the field. He was looking left the whole time where the other stuff happened. So he was a complete decoy. I'm so not into bringing a defender. Oh, Big Jeff, get Big Jeff a chance. Let the offensive players play offense. They have 5 tight ends on the team, and John Ojukwu playing as a jumbo tight end. That's 6 tight ends. And you need to get Jeff Simmons on the field to block as a tight end. That's 7 tight ends. How many tight ends do the Titans need to function on offense? That is about 4 too many tight ends there. Take away a whole bunch of tight ends and give me 3, like a normal functioning roster. And look, whether or not Mac Jones or Will Levis was better, there was no huge difference between the two of them. This was a game where you play safe and don't do much to hurt the team and let the run game and the defense do their thing and don't lose it and all of that. Their numbers were relatively similar, and I don't think either of them won or lost the game. Here's what did really well. The Jaguars actually changing the pace and going to no huddle. They marched down the field when they went no huddle and decided we're going to throw the ball to our best receiver, Brian Thomas, 6 yards at a time, and go, 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 go. The Titans should watch that no huddle and say, hey, they did something different on offense that changed things up for them. We ought to try it. But last week, Nick Holtz told me we've run hurry up about 5% of the time, and we don't really like to do it because we've got to make protection calls, and we've got to, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and we want to make sure we're in the right look for the right read to make the right call. Well, Jacksonville seemed to be able to make the right read and the right call when they went hurry up. The Titans need to be able to do that. That's one of the biggest indictments of this offense to me, is that the Titans basically admitted they can't do it. They won't do it because they can't do it. You've got to be able to do it. For how much they're behind and need to hurry up, for how much controlling of the tempo they should be doing, it wasn't really a factor for them today. But look at a team that needed to do it, who was able to do it, just to change things and put the defense in an awkward situation, and the Titans defense didn't react particularly well to it. Rephrasing Vader's question, let me rephrase. He said, give Callie the benefit of the doubt. Who's underperforming in the front office that should be changed sooner than later? Well, I mean, there are 2 people in the front office. I think the scouts underperform across the board because, I don't think they were listened to by John Robinson. They're probably listened to a little bit more by Ray and Carthon at the very least, but we don't know much about the granular stuff that goes on with them. I'm not impressed by Carthon. I mean, Latham is going to be a good player. He's slid right now and has not been playing great the last couple of weeks. Sweat, scores higher on pass disruption than I would imagine. Here's another thing, a quick aside. Jeffrey Simmons out of the game at some key moments today. They don't know how to rotate defensive players in and out. Take them out for a breather at some unimportant times. He's out for a key 2nd and 5 today and stayed out for 4 plays after they were off the field, coming off a timeout. So he's resting for a timeout. He's resting for a 2nd and 5. He's out for like 4 plays in a row. Rest him at better, less important times. Get him off the field for 4 first downs in a row. You've got to find a better way to rest Jeffrey Simmons than the way they're resting Jeffrey Simmons, where he's consistently been off the field for 4 or 5 plays in a row. And I know he needs consecutive plays off at some times, but they're not doing a good job of resting him at the right time. Rand Carthon, the free agent class is not a well-graded group. He had a lot of money to spend. He did not do well with it. And then he also said, like, hey, our 6th and 7th rounders are going to be impact guys. They're going to be on the field for us. Well, I didn't say James Williams or Cedric Gray given snaps today at linebacker. They don't trust them. They're giving it to Luke Gifford and Otis Reese. He didn't know how to keep players who could play special teams. He's not done a good job. He had a hand in hiring Brian Callahan, who most of you are, way down on. I'm willing to give him some time. But 25 to 30,000 came to see 2 bad teams. Not surprised. Great photo, PK. I appreciate you keeping it real. I wish we could get real number, right? Like, it's so phony to announce 67,000 distributed. I don't even believe that many tickets are distributed. Like, distributed by whom? To whom? S. Rob says, this game felt different. First time this season, I'm really questioning Callahan. Team is regressing. I feel the same way. These last 2 games have been real horror shows. 6 points against the Jags. Their scoring average was finally up out of the 17s to 18.4, which is no accomplishment whatsoever. It's back to 17.4 off of 1 game. Other thing for Levis, CA says, is athleticism. His running doesn't give us crap. He runs into contact and has no feel. He's not a good feel. I wrote this story last Tuesday about pocket awareness. I'd urge you to go to paulkuharsky.com and read it. I'd urge you to sign up at paulkuharsky.com. I think Blake Bedingfield's review tomorrow morning will center largely on the red zone failures of the Titans. I asked him to look into that specifically. But I wrote about pocket awareness. I think it can get better. I don't think it – look, Levis is always going to have some deficiencies in his game. The question is, can he be good enough to win with? And, can he be good enough to win with? Or you're going to spend your life thinking that you're going to stumble into a Patrick Mahomes. How many teams stumble into a Patrick Mahomes? I mean, you have the number 1 pick and you get Joe Burrow. Well, that's fine. Well, another team had the number 1 pick and landed Trevor Lawrence, who was supposed to be a can't miss guy, and he's been a miss guy. So even that guarantee doesn't guarantee you success. And then, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, people didn't know that they were going to be fantastic players. So, it takes a degree of luck to find them. I'm not counting on the Titans to, at some point, you would think that they would get lucky and find a 15-year quarterback who would lift them to new heights. But in the meantime, they've got to find somebody functional that they can build a team around and win football games to be, at least 9-8 instead of this shit that we see here. And I think if you give them a right tackle and call plays better and continue to play defense like that, you sure as hell can win this game. You're not going to win, at Washington when you give up 28 points in 20 minutes, but you sure as hell can win this game with Will Levis, maybe not playing the way he played today, but again, he was NWI end zone catch away from winning this game. He was Calvin Ridley planting his foot, turning upfield, and not believing that somebody was covering him away. He didn't play well. They didn't play well. But again, this is a different quarterback than he was in the first 3 games of the season, and I don't see a great solution for the Titans going forward. If they can find them, God bless them. Paramount, everybody's telling me. Yellowstone is on Paramount. Now Paramount Plus. How much more is Paramount Plus than Paramount? Yet another streaming service I need. Yeah, Callahan feels a bit over his head now. I think LaFleur, look, it went into a completely different situation. I'm not comparing the two, but LaFleur was a little bit over his head his first year in Green Bay. He just happened to have a multiple-time MVP running his offense, and he inherited a great roster. So, again, I'm surprised that it's not better, because all of the vast majority of these young guys who have taken over in the vast majority of these places have done pretty well. And so leave it to the Titans to find one that doesn't start well, doesn't instill confidence, and all of that. It's a very Tennessee-ish thing to do. But what's the next step? I don't know. It seems to me everybody's that's calling for his head is too confident about what comes next. Unless you go crawling back to Vrabel, which I'm kidding, is not going to happen. See, here's somebody's telling me that Yellowstone's on Peacock. I think it's live on Peacock, but then streamed on Paramount. I mean, what the fuck? Why is a big time show so difficult to nail down? See, this, Austin, is why quarterback wins are not really a thing. Quarterbacks throw 5 interceptions sometimes and they win. It doesn't mean that they played better than the other quarterback who didn't throw 5 interceptions. Bubbles, I agree with you. Callahan lacks the ability to make good in-game adjustments, which is a poor quality of a head coach. That is definitely not his strength. Luke Gifford, Josh, is in no way the defensive side version of Mason Kinsey, in that he has not been cut and elevated multiple times, in that he has been around for 2 years, I think, as opposed to like 5, in that he's not played on the practice squad for an extensive time. So I think you're stretching it a little bit there. Is the current personnel, Joe asks, capable of playing better? Some of them are capable of playing better. Is this as good as this group gets? I mean, I certainly think we saw this group play significantly better against Houston and beat Houston, and that was not that long ago. So clearly it can be better. Tight end play is bad across the NFL. So what you should do is get 5 bad tight ends on your roster. What would I do if I owned the Titans after the season? I'd have some big-time discussions with Rain and Brinker about the plan. They don't have to announce any kind of legitimate attendance, but there is a spot on the official game book here, paid attendance. It's not showing up, paid attendance. So as long as that's on there, they got to have a number to put in there. Games like today make you question your love for the team and the game. God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. I think that's a little much for me. I mean, that phrase is about like real battles, like war battles, and like battles of conscience, and battles like real life struggles. Following a football team that only wins 3 games is like a frivolous thing. I mean, I know it's very serious to you, and we all have our passions about our teams, but like, you can go change the channel. CA says, I get that Vrabel has a bad defense at times, but he didn't call plays. He called defensive plays. He did well at his piece of leading, also situational, and Jesus, his penalty management was far superior. His penalty management was generally very good until he, had a bad roster. He was a leader of men, unquestionably, and his situational knowledge and and readiness was, superior to what we see going on here. Where do they go from here? Jeff Simmons, hey, he said it. You've got something to play for, the name on the back of your jersey. That's what he said. Cliche management is not the best. Cliche management needs to donate money to get Soto back. First off, I would never donate money to billionaires to pay millionaires. Secondly, I don't want Soto back. I want 3 players for the price of Soto, and I don't want to sign a guy to a 15-year contract. The leadership is void, Jared said. Honestly, I don't think the leadership is the biggest issue. The plan and the execution and the ability to adjust and come up with things series to series and in the moment is the biggest issue to me. If he wasn't a leader, we'd hear some players say stuff. Though they don't have a lot of players with a lot of stones. I will say that, which maybe is part of the problem. They don't have a lot of guys with a lot of boldness to them, right? No one here would dare say anything. And that's viewed as being a great teammate, but it also is, there's nobody on this team. Simmons is good enough to say what he wants, but he's not bold enough to say what he wants. But there's no Delaney Walker who would say something that might not be well received. Jarrell Casey might have done that. Logan Ryan might have done it. Kevin Byard might have done it. There's nobody that's even close to being willing to do that. A lot of that's because most of the guys in position to think about doing that are older guys who are relatively new to the franchise, haven't played a lot here, wouldn't want to rock the boat. I mean, I think it's somewhat like corporate America right now, in that you just don't say anything that pisses off your boss and you try to stay safely employed. And I understand. I had a lot of friends that operate that way. I have trouble operating that way, and it's a good share why I work independently now, which is a good thing in a lot of ways, but has its downside. These guys can't work independently. And, how much does it serve the individual to speak out about, what he sees going on around him and to try to wake people up? I don't know. I don't know if a lot of the people are wake-upable. And I do think a lot of the people just aren't very good. Take a couple more here, and appreciate all of you coming. EDLEYS BBQ, the best barbecue in and around Nashville, at 8 local stores from East Nashville to Donaldson to Gallatin to Franklin, near where I live. One at the factory, one in Berry Farms, sorry. Terrific food. I get my mouth watering just thinking about it. I encourage you to go there. They've been a great sponsor to me for this podcast. This podcast on Sunday nights is a very seemingly cathartic thing for a lot of you, too often cathartic and not celebratory. I can't bring you results, but I enjoy discussing the games with you and your good questions and the like. Please join the website. Great analysis, news, different perspective from the herd. I think I've covered the team since 1996 when it was in Houston. Blake Benningfield, 19-year scout with the team, writes after the game about what he saw from a scouting perspective, writes before game about what he anticipates. Mike Herndon, once a week, analytical, very thought-provoking column, very popular. PaulKuharsky.com, $7.50 a month. It's the price of an expensive cup of coffee or a cocktail. Maybe not even that expensive. I don't know. I don't drink coffee, but I've paid a lot more for a cocktail. I can tell you that. Appreciate your support. Chip Clark, I said the Jaguars are arguably the worst team in the NFL. That's false. I said they were arguably the worst team in the NFL, and that the Titans losing to them arguably makes the Titans the worst team in the NFL, though the record says the Giants and the Raiders are worse, and the draft order says the Jaguars are still worse than the Titans, even with the head-to-head result. So isn't it worse for leadership to be falsely positive than to be realistic, since they set expectations so high and are so bad? If they didn't know they'd be worse, that's an indictment. Well, what you're asking, Brandon, is about a lot of stuff that's being said behind closed doors. I mean, he may be telling them tomorrow morning, you guys really suck. And you sucked, and you've sucked the last 2 weeks. He might have told them that. He might have been telling them that along the way. And Carthon and Brinker may be sitting at the board that's got their 3 deep on it, reviewing things the same way with more evidence in hand. We don't know. We only know what Callahan only says at a microphone. And Callahan, he can't completely bury himself, but he's the most honest coach that any of us have ever been around. He doesn't get pissed off at tough questions. And he came out today, I think, in a big mistake and said there were a lot of positives. And I immediately said, you couldn't score a touchdown today and you saw a lot of positives? And, he didn't get chafed by that the way every coach before him would have. Because he knows. He knows it's bad. And he knows he can't hide. But, like we're talking about, a lot of this personnel, who's in charge of personnel? Not Brian Callahan. Need veteran coaches to balance out Callie. Well, Tracy Rocker has been around a lot, defensive line coach. Steve Jackson, safety coach, been around a lot. Bill Callahan, you might have heard of him, took the Raiders to a Super Bowl as a head coach, was a head coach at a big-time college program. I mean, those guys are not green. I don't know where you're getting the impression that his coaching staff is green. He didn't hire a bunch of kids. He's got plenty of veterans on his coaching staff. What happens in the locker room after a loss like this? Looked like Callahan lost a family member during his presser. These guys, are not happy, but I mean, they get a lot of questions like that. Like, guys are down and unhappy, but they're not suicidal. They had a terrible day at work. They get dressed. Most of them answer some questions from us if we have questions, and they want to go home to their families. Probably have a beer or a big dinner, watch some football, and ice something. I think a lot of you overestimate what goes on in the locker room. Like, if they win, they're happy and sore and want to go home. If they lose, they're disappointed and sore and they want to go home. It's not like a drastic thing. They don't ride these huge crests and valleys the way fans do. That when they talk about that, don't get too high and don't get too low. It's cliche, but they also don't mean it. The CA is talking here about the penalties. The penalties is something that their inability to fix is very concerning. I think, though, and Callahan's defended them on this, and I think that is something that players appreciate. But the fact that Petit Frere say false starts is because Petit Frere is not very good, and he needs every advantage he can get. So he's jumping out of his stance early because he knows this guy is about to beat me because he's better than I am. He's faster than I am. I got to get back and get into position to be able to handle him. And I think a good share of the Titans penalties, I'm holding this guy because otherwise he's going to kill the quarterback behind me. Brownlee, has a bad habit of being very handsy. But I think a good share of the penalties are the result of guys who are not good enough to do their job, needing to commit a foul in order to do their job. Jonnu Smith's having a very good year in Miami, but he hasn't done much since he left Tennessee. What was he in New England? He got huge money, and did very little. And then wasn't he in Atlanta for a year? Also back with Arthur, I think, and did very little. So the rule is after the season, the head coach and so the head coach has to talk. And then the GM and or the president of football and or the president. So they could do just Rand or just Brinker or just Burke Nihill if they wanted, or any combination of those guys at an availability. But somebody other than Callahan has to talk. Traditionally, they would have Callahan do his regular thing the day after the game, and then later in the week, something additional. So we will see. Mike Vrabel's burner would like to see Denard Wilson take over the rest of the year and see what he's like in that position. You think he's a better leader of men? Did you see his defense last week? They couldn't tackle anybody. They had no clue what they were doing. Washington threw short zone stuff into huge holes in the defense. This idea that Denard is some great guy, I don't know why, a great coach. I mean, I think he's got the potential to be a very good coach, but I think he's getting far too much credit. The defense is incredibly overrated. Incredibly overrated. I mean, it did fine today. Doesn't sack the quarterback. Had 2 turnovers today. That's an occasion for a celebration because it doesn't get turnovers. Doesn't play well in the red zone, talking broadly. The Washington game was an absolute abomination. Denard Wilson. And then who's coaching the offense? Nick Holtz? You know where Nick Holtz comes from, right? I mean, Nick Holtz is like a mini Brian Callahan. Had somebody else telling me that Callahan has to stop calling plays. That'd be ingenious to have Callahan stop calling plays so Nick Holtz could call Callahan's plays. A guy with no experience. At least Callahan's called them for 13 games now. DH, plug in Edley. Jeff, I do not know the answer to this question. Red zone play calling is a big issue. Why throw it so much when the run was working all day? The run slowed down in the second half. But I don't know why you wouldn't have run at least once on 3 chances from the 2-yard line. Jim is emphasizing that rebuilds don't happen overnight. I think people are a little too patient. I mean, I'm not calling for firings, but rebuilds do happen pretty quickly in a lot of places. They do. Washington right now has got a quick rebuild happening. Houston, they had some buildup to their rebuild, and they traded Deshaun Watson for $1 billion draft picks. Both of those teams were lucky enough to draft good quarterbacks high. And the Titans aren't in that position really right now. But teams do turn things around relatively quickly in the league. It does not take 3 years. It does not need to take 3 years. And these guys don't have 3 years, and they shouldn't. So Mike says that the reason that Wilson should be the head coach is because he's a better leader of men. You can come get that stuff. Come on in. Better leader of men. Well, you need to be more than a leader of men to be a good head coach. Callahan will be fired eventually. Come on and get that stuff. It doesn't bother me. Callahan will be fired eventually. Might as well get a look. Well, every coach will be fired eventually. So in that regard, then everybody should get a try. What's your name, man? Sean, sir. Say hi to the people, Sean. Hi. This is Sean. He helps clean up all of our messes. Nice to see you, Sean. This is the Paul Kuharsky podcast. Nice to see you. That's Sean. 3 more years or 3 years total? 3 years total. I'm not even saying 3 years total. I mean, you've got to show something inside 2 years, I think, to not be in severe trouble. But, 3 years. If you haven't shown something in 3 years, you're in big trouble. Assuming the Titans pick around 7th, this will be our last question here. Assuming the Titans pick around 7th, would you rather draft an edge Titans desperately need, or trade down to load up on best player available. Both seem viable, but we're crying for an edge rusher. Trading down from 7 is not that viable. If you're trading up in the draft to get somebody, you're going higher than 7, generally speaking. You have to be really fortunate to be able to trade up, to get somebody to trade up with you at 7. And I don't think that's happening. You got to get a higher pick. Take care, Sean. So they need to draft higher than that to be able to get any kind of certainty in terms of being able to trade down. You know, I'd like to see him be drafted at 7 and trade down. Haven't seen any indication that Rand's capable of that kind of thing. One more here. Where are the snaps from our 6th and 7th rounders Rand talked about? Well, Jaquan was the 6th, right? Jaquan got benched today. Jaquan was inactive today. So the 1 6th or 7th rounder who was getting snaps, no more snaps, which was quite a relief. Mason Kinsey, competent returner. What did Mason Kinsey do? He fair caught. This punter is quite good at skying the ball. Cook. Mason Kinsey had 1 return for 6 yards, and it was a relief. He did not fumble it. Tajay Spears averaged 29 yards. They had a 33-yard return on kickoff returns. Hey, I love you people. I appreciate you people. If you're not a member of PaulKuharsky.com, do me a favor. Go check it out. Join us. A lot of good people. Most of the people in here are memories. Kinsey did well. Somebody's saying. Kinsey fair caught balls and returned 1 ball 6 yards. Let's not normalize thinking that that's doing well as a punt returner, okay? Didn't drop it. Not dropping it should not qualify as doing well for the Tennessee Titans punt returner. We need to get away from that. Cheers to all of you. Eat at Edley's. Subscribe to PaulKuharsky.com. I'll see you tomorrow morning. I'll appear on Robbie and Rex Road early and join Braden Gall on a football show tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. Check it out. Go read my column at PaulKuharsky.com and stay tuned for more original content there tomorrow afternoon. Don't block the box. And please, please, please be sure to lock your locks. Take care, everybody. Thanks.